Welcome back. Michael Wickerson at Wickerson Studios. I am going to, well, actually, I'm at the Kansas City Art Institute in the Sculpture Department up in our new digital lab, which is a nice little place up here. So I'll be looking at the big screen over here and looking at the screen when I can. I'm going to continue the learning Grasshopper from plugins, and this is what I started this morning and overviewed, but we're going to build it from scratch. But because it's pretty beginner still, we've gone in and we've actually used one plugin in our first episode called the Bifocals plugin. And you can see that I've ended up scripting in here exercise params, because that's the section we're in. And we're going to take a look at the second script, params inputs. Now there's going to be lots and lots of parts. And there's a plugin right there that I want to use. But the other one I want to actually use is over here under Mesh Edit. And I think it's Surface from, actually I think it's Mesh from Points. I think that's what it's called. And there it is. And you'll see if I pull it in, you can't. And so when I hit Control Alt and hover on it, it's going to tell me where it is. And it says it's in Utilities in Mesh. And when you go to Utilities in Mesh, you're not going to find it because you don't have the plugin. So what you want to do to get that plugin we talked about earlier, go to Grasshopper Docs and take a look at Mesh Edit. And that should bring up the download you need, even though I thought it would be here. If not, let me just cheat and go here. Mesh Edit, it's one word, and then you can hit download. And even though I think it's in Grasshopper Docs, it must be hidden away somewhere. Then you hit the download, and it'll take you back to Food for Rhino, and you can download Mesh Edit and follow the same rules that I did last time to get you to install it. And so you definitely want to go in and make sure that in your special folders, in your components file, somewhere on your computer, you've got Mesh Edit tucked in there. And I think there it is for me. And whenever you do get it put into those library files, however you chase it back into your libraries in Grasshopper, make sure any file you want to use, you right click on, you hit Properties, and you go here and hit Unblock. So there doesn't be an issue with this one, so it should be up and running. Then restart Grasshopper Rhino, and you should have the mesh from points. It's a great tool, not really necessary because you can always make a surface from points, and it's very easy to go from surface from points over to a mesh from points. It's a nice node because you might want to get in there and actually color your mesh. So mesh from points allows for a little more kind of front end, like how you're going to look at it and what you're going to do with it. So that's what we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on that little node, utilities, mesh from points, and that'll be our second plugin. So I guess I'll leave it there as we get going. And what are we going to do to script this? So let me grab my other, not this one, this one, and let me see what we're going to do to start. Now, what I am going to do is I'm going to cut and paste from another script just to save time, and I'm having a little trouble with my mouse coming back over to the screen. I'm not sure if I have to leave the screen low or high. It looks like to the right. And I can come in here and I can copy it from the other one and paste it. And it's basically a text that says, actually we'll pull these two plugins of what we're going to use up here. Basically, edit snapping and animate on number sliders, shortcuts for setting sliders. And I'm going to do this as a basic intro because I think it ends up leading into plugins for Grasshopper. This might be a little tedious and I should put it into the first script series, but it is a nice area to go. On hindsight, I think I will delete it and we'll do it at another time in learning Rhino from Grasshopper. So I'm going to skip this and we're going to jump hard into this very cool script. And I'm going to grab this text, which is what we're going to walk through. And this may seem a little extensive, but once again, let me slide out of here and get back over to my tool. There it is. I'm going to paste it in, and it's down here. Let me see if I can get it. Paste. It's this text, and it's what I want to look at right off the bat. So you can type this into a scribble tool, and I'll revisit it. I've got a little bit of typos in here that I'm noticing. Let's just read through it. Left double click image sampler, and that's what we want to do. We want to get in, and I'm going to apply this to a Grasshopper, to a Mesh Edit plugin. So over here in inputs, which is why this whole section was about learning inputs, you have an image sampler. pull it in, and that's what you're going to be faced with, something like this. And the image sampler itself needs data to get up and running, and how would you get moving with it? But you basically have to double click on the image sampler, I believe, and you can immediately, I'm going to give a couple of guides here, go and find any object on your computer. I'm going to choose desktop and run down here to this image. I'm going to import this one. You're immediately inputting with a certain domain that you can edit and change. You're going to have a color image probably. You want to change that to black and white, and you're definitely going to want to interpolate, and you're going to want to start with that file to something you could do something with. It demands an input. Who knows what that wants, and who knows what it's going to output, but we're going to have a little bit of fun with that. That's one way to bring in an image. Another way is to read a file. We're going to take this script. So basically, I'm going to move farther in considering the domain. I'm just going to make a little typo correction here. Consider the domain, set the image, set the black and white, and interpolate. And then this is the video online tutorial from, I believe, Daniel Christev that will show you the details of what I'm going to do today, but we're actually going to walk through it. So let me just double check for a second my, sorry, I'm going to double check my data, make sure I am recording, and we can keep going. It's always embarrassing if I didn't do that. We are going to consider a circle for every point. This is a little farther on when we get into another script. We're thinking about how we can take an image and how we can manufacture something from it. So here is one example of what you can do. Initially, you would move in and you would create a rectangular grid to kind of interpret this. This computer mouse is sticking. You would actually go into vector, create a rectangular grid, and you would use the points of that grid to interpret through to this object. And you'll see the grid is made, and that's where I'm going to end up making it. And immediately you might want to think, oh, what's the size of this and what are my extends? And you could go in, and this might not be how everybody goes about it, 12 by 12, and that would be a type of platform for this as to where I would actually want to pack this script in. We're actually not going to do that. We're going to keep this node, we're going to keep this parameter off for now, and you're going to see how I slowly build this. I am going to need some X and Y sizes to script it, but right now those points coming out of this grid are readable. So as points in vector, I'm just going to use this as a visualization. I can deconstruct those points, and I can actually go in and take my X. I just want to have a look at this for a second, and I want to find a bounds, a range, and we saw this in our last script, probably on another section for learning Rhino with Grasshopper. We take those bounds and we can see what is actually the interval or domain of this. And of course we're going to use a visualization tool of a panel to look at data, and it should be 0 to 1. But this is not a number to not a number to not a number, not a number, and that's probably because I have not flattened my data coming in. Give me 1 second, even though I just take graphed. Yeah, there's flatten. We got not a number to not a number because of what's coming in. And the points themselves, if I take a look here, this is going to be a bit of a nightmare. I have 5 extends. I should have my points. It should be writing. My extends here is 1 and 1. My deconstruct is working from point. What is the issue here? Conversion from rectangle to point. I put my cells in instead of my points. Because I was looking at my data, I was wondering why it wasn't running from 0 to whatever data it wanted. Right now it's 0 to 10. That's not what we want. We want to find a way to start to scale this figure so it doesn't get distorted. And if you take a look, I can really warp that by just the visualization of what's here, and I'll make that kind of obvious to what's going in. So I've got to fix this. I don't want to go in and just hard code this and have it out of whack. I actually want it to actually scale correctly. So what I'm going to do, and this is a technique of Daniel Christev that blew me away. I'm going to go farther back here, and I hope some people find this interesting. Primitives, we're going to find a file path. We're going to right click and set our existing file path exactly to the object that we actually brought into the image slider. And now it's in there. There actually is the data in there. And the next tool that we're probably going to want to do is import that image and see if there's a tool I can use here. And I don't think this is actually import image. I'm pretty sure, and this little symbol kind of tricky, I can't even remember what that was, synchronized. We're going to put that image in here, and we're basically going to default to that rectangle that samples and make an image. So give it a second. Excuse me. Coming down with something today. The script's a little slow moving right now, 3.9 seconds, which seems appropriate. Give it a second to kind of process through, and hopefully I don't crash by bringing that object in. And there we go. We've got that processing through that I'm taking that data and trying to get it in here. So I've imported the image from that file path. There it is. There's nothing being read right now as I zoom out. It's a pretty big shape, pretty gigantic, and you can see the nightmares trying to work with that. So I'm going to take that visualization and actually turn it to preview off. But even though I have the data there, I'm going to set a bounding box around this. And this really blew me away when I found this as a system. And once again, Daniel Christoph was a total inspiration to make me go into this. Let's find a bounding box around it, and then in doing so, let's take that bounding box and do what we do to all objects that are breps. Let's debrep it. Take that box and debrep it. So this is kind of slow going as we're entering into it. The file's big or small depending on what you're using, and mine actually is awfully big. I'm going to look to the faces, and I'm going to choose that first face, and I'm going to use another node called dimensions. And this is a little more advanced, but I'd say intermediate at most. The faces themselves have a U and V dimension, and we can stop a minute and have a look at those. The U dimension being 3800 and this one being 2815. I'm then going to go so far, which is pretty incredible when I think about it. Give me 1 second. I'm going to actually divide those numbers and do a little bit of math to scale this. So bear with me in this section as I go through. I think I'll make it larger so you can actually see what's happening. This is a really nice algorithm to solve fiddling around in the image sampler. I'm actually going to divide and use the math term, and I did not come up with this myself, and I need to give credit where credit's due. I'm actually going to divide the U count by the V count and end up with a number that's a scalable number. And I'm going to have 1.35. I don't want to use that number directly. I want to have a little bit of parametric control over that, so I want to multiply that number. And I'm actually going to multiply that number by a pretty even number. And I'm going to make it a slider in case I do want to change the side, 100. And that will be that digit that's coming out now. So I've scaled it right back to 135 point yada yada yada. And I want to floor divide that, or whatever you want to call that. I want to ditch all those decimals, so I'm just going to pack it into an integer and see what I end up with. It was a wonderful way to get a number. Now what I can do with that number is I can, and this is the magic of it, I can take my 100 setting for setting the scale and put it into my y extends, and I can take this digit and put it into my x extends, and then I can actually flip these numbers, the inverse of, I think it's called 1 over x. I can take that number and use that as my number to go into my x size, and I can also use that same number to go into my y size, and I can change this if I want to. But what I end up doing is producing a panel that now moved from 1 to 10. I found a way to funnel that into 1 to 1, which really just reparameterizes the image like it would reparameterize a surface. And you're asking yourself, like, why did I bother doing that? Well, let's move farther with it and see where the script goes, where you normally would have begun. Now I have a bunch of wonderful data coming out, and I can grab that data probably as number, if it will produce all my data. There it is, starting at 0.85. That's nice. It's a slow-moving script. Every time I type something in, it wants to do something. And now I can do some more multiplication and math on it to scale it and make some visual objects. And I might make this small again as I move to this stage so you can see kind of what's happening with the form. But we've got to do something with these points, and we've got to build them again. So going back a second, I also want to have a rectangle grid over here. I'm going to copy this one again. Actually, I'm not going to confuse you. I'm actually going to go into vector, grab myself a rectangle grid, and I'm going to have a size that I want to kind of remap it to, and I'm just going to say 4.5 for now, just to begin with. And I'm going to have that be the x size, this be the y size, so it's squared. I am going to keep the scale the same from the 100 scale in the x extends, and then I'm also going to grab that in the x extends here to get this grid. And then with that grid, I'll show you exactly where we go. This is kind of nice. This grid down here, I'm going to go back into my multiplier here, and I'm going to set up a moving of points. So I'm going to go to, I'm actually going to move this in a negative direction. I'm going to move this negative 20 dot dot to 20, depending on which way I want to move it in the z direction. I'm going to use a multiplier on that. And we're dealing with a lot of points and things, and I definitely want to treat this as a vector. So I want to move these in the z direction. And I want to move those points that I had here that were being made. I'm going to use my transformation move. And I will take those points and I will move them by that vector. And we're going to shrink, and you're going to see that drawing starts to move those points and emerge. And it's kind of hard to see there, but I think we can look at it. You need to skew it to the side to kind of make sense of it. Let me just go here. Kind of awkward to see what's going on. Maybe I can find a better visualization of it. The best visualization to take it to, give me 1 second, is surface from points, but with surface from points. This is the real magic of what Daniel Christev did. I'll just type it in. Surface from points. We can take that geometry as the point count. We can flatten those points, but in order to make them work, you need a U count, and it turns out that U count is, with a little bit of equations I've shown before. Let me just double check the, sorry. I just have to hover on it for a second to get a glimpse of it. I'm actually going to add a point count. This computer. I'm going to add an equation to here, expression x plus 1 to do a count of the points. And I should have an equation that popped up there. And I can take what was flattened, what was entered, floored over here, that it should end up producing that surface. And that's pretty cool. That's a roundabout way and a little more complex, and gives you parametric control of pushing into the positive, pushing into the negative, embossing, or raising the relief of any drawing you want to bring in here. What a great system to scale and get things in order, and then also play with, you know, really nice the fact that the whole thing is scaled so you can continue and it still maintains that. You can have a higher relief to a smaller one, 100 to a longer one. Really nice script. And like I said, because of coloring and studying, the tool that I wanted to get into was over here on mesh. Is because I had the plugin. I could go to mesh from points, and I could do exactly the same thing. And I'm just going to relay this down to U. And what you have to keep in mind is U is the 7, but your V direction is still tied to that original slider. So let's go back in here to this 100 value, come down here. Oh my goodness, that was wild. That was my mouse running out of room and me going crazy. And pulling in another tool. Wow, that was wild. This is what happens when you get outside of your workspace in your one place and you start trying to do things in another. Let's just pull that one over a little bit. The script's heavy, so every time I move it, it's kind of doing things. You see how scripts get very heavy in Grasshopper. Put in the V direction, and then we need the points to actually generate it. So we're just going to grab the points down here, and that should produce a mesh. I'm going to highlight that mesh, and we've got a problem with it, and that's because our UV directions definitely need the same equation. So for those that have not used the function nodes, this is one way of getting the equation in here, x plus 1, the data plus 1 to be the u count. You could do the same here, but I'm actually going to show you the easiest way that's most visual. Grab your data, relay it in here, add 1 to it, and that data will then take and put that into the V, and you'll have to do the same thing right here with, it's a little clumsy, but you have to do the same thing, shift control back to here. You get that 3-second delay, plug it in here, and everything should be running. And I didn't get it, so give me 1 second. Flatten points. I have not flattened my points again. Otherwise, it's not looking at it as a list, it's looking at it as a tree data and everything structured. Hopefully, flattening it, it did work and I got my mesh. I am curious why the red is coming up. Insufficient number of points to produce the mesh, but the mesh is produced. So that's very interesting that it says it's not working, but it fully worked just fine for the number of points. Let me just check my UV direction. X plus 1 and x plus 1. So it's weird that it says it's not working yet totally, that plugin, and that might be just an error that occurs that wasn't caught as a corner case in the app itself, but it definitely is working. So I'm just going to take this and put it to a color, and I'm going to do-si-do over here. And I didn't have trouble in my other script, but this one seems to have done that. I do like that you can add color to meshes, so it can be very fun to do that. I've got my transparency set so much you can't appreciate it. Pull it back into blue, and at least let us know that this is having no problem actually working, and hopefully that color will override that red that's there. I have to wonder why it says insufficient number of points, because it doesn't have insufficient number of points. We've got plenty of points, 13,736. That script itself, it had to be built, and what I want you to think about is you don't have to take this data and send it to a surface to manufacture and think about an item as to what you do. You don't have to move it in a Z direction. What we will do in the future, and I'll do as a second part, is we'll take it to perforated holes and cut out circles, and then we'll take it to a method and maybe play off of our own. Now I want to leave that for my class, my elective class, to see what they come up with. I'm very excited Monday, but this nice little script will be up and getting you ready. The other thing is to consider a circle on every point, and note the interpolated option reduces the noise. Consider displacements, custom previews, attractor points, assign rotations to other geometries, and all the aspects of what you can do in manufacturing. And that's where I'm going to go with my class next week. And that was a little clumsy, a little awkward, but it's there. You got a pretty nice form that you can jump into, and you can change your model, change whatever you want to inspire it. So take a look at the things you've done in your life, and take a look at things with contrast, and see if you can't find the source imagery to write a pretty awesome fabrication script to jumping between surfaces, meshes, and then we'll go into different forms of manufacture depending on your materials or processes. Anyway, I think that's it. I have to wonder if we were recording. I guess we were. I just wonder, what I didn't do, and I apologize, is I think I have an option to pull out chat, and I didn't use it, so that kind of stinks. I left a little, there it is, it's right there. Didn't have any comments while I went today. It was live. I have to wonder, this is a pain. I'm going to slow down and find out how I get off my page and into this one. Okay, I see, I have to go off the side about there. So there wasn't any comments. I'm going to type in thanks for watching, and we'll post this one, and this will be part A after the intro, and we will definitely go in here and then take this script a little farther into the complexities. That's it. Oh, I see what happened. Okay.